Jane, I'm going to ever so quickly try and put you on the laptop rather than my phone. So if I lose you for a minute and ask to come back in, will you let me back in?
That's fine. Edward, we're now live.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us for another meeting of the Cambridgeshire Police and Crime Panel. I'm Edward Lee and I'm chair of this panel. And I'd like to welcome those members of the public and press who are watching the live stream of this meeting via the Peterborough City Council's YouTube page. Due to the government guidance on social distancing, this meeting is being held remotely. The meetings of the meeting will be produced in the usual way, and a recording of the meeting will be available to view on the Peterborough City Council's YouTube page. To enable the meeting to run in an orderly manner, I would ask all members of the panel to keep their video camera switched on for the duration of the meeting and to keep their microphone muted, except when invited to speak. The Acting Commissioner and his staff have opted for security reasons to join us by telephone, and therefore their faces will not appear on the live stream, but as a phone symbol instead. I ask that you too keep your phones on mute, except when invited to speak. Any members wishing to ask questions or make a comment should indicate this by clicking the raised hand function in the participant screen. When I invite you to speak, please unmute your microphone, ask your question, and then mute it again to allow the relevant person to respond. If we should run into any technical difficulties, I will declare an adjournment while the fault is addressed, and the public broadcast will be paused. If it is not possible to address the fault, then the meeting may be abandoned until such time as it can be reconvened. I'll start with a roll call of members of the panel. Councillor Alley.
Present.
Councillor Bywater.
Present.
Councillor Giles.
Present.
Councillor Massey.
Present.
Councillor Sharp.
Present.
Councillor Shellens.
Present.
Councillor Smith.
Present.
Standing in for Councillor Daunton. Councillor Tierney. I think we have his apologies. Councillor Warwick.
Present, and yes, Councillor Tierney has sent his apologies.
Thank you. Councillor Warren.
Present.
Thank you. And Councillor Wigan.
Present.
And Claire George, independent member.
Present.
Thank you very much. We also have in attendance Fiona McMillan, who's the monitoring officer to the panel, Jane Webb, who's the secretariat to the panel, Acting Commissioner Ray Bisbee, Jim Haylett, who's the Acting Chief Executive for the OPCC, John Lee, who's Director of Finance and Resources at the Cambridgeshire Constabulary, Christina Strood, Head of Policy for Fire and Police at the OPCC, and Nick Dean, Chief Constable for the Cambridgeshire Constabulary, who is here to support the Acting Commissioner and not to take direct questions from panel members. So moving on to the agenda, item 1, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Daunton, Councillor Smith is substitute, and from Councillor Tierney as well.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Do any members of the panel have any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest that they wish to declare? I take that as a no. Thank you. So then moving to the minutes of the meeting held on the 22nd of July 2020. Are there any corrections or clarifications that members would like to make to these minutes? I'm not seeing any raised hands. So are we happy to accept these as an accurate record of that meeting? Any dissent, please raise your hand. Okay, so we will agree to.
I would abstain.
Thank you. Did you get that, Jane? Okay, so moving to item 5, the review of complaints. We have received no complaints against the acting commissioner, and therefore there is nothing to note on that. So moving on to item 6, the first.
There were no public questions, sorry.
Oh, sorry, I missed.
Item 4.
Oh yes, sorry, it doesn't come up on my index. Yes, sorry, yes, okay, sorry, item 4, no public questions or statements. So moving to item 6, this is the acting commissioner's annual report for the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, which he has a statutory obligation to produce. This is a review of the 2019 to 2020 year. Acting Commissioner, would you like to introduce this item?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to do a little introduction, if that's okay. I would like to thank the panel for providing me with your areas of questioning prior to this meeting and giving me the opportunity to respond to these within the report that you find before you. As I said before, what needs to be recognised in these exceptional circumstances that we've got is that both myself and my team have to focus on the 3 big areas of my role. They are namely the police governance, community safety, and criminal justice. In addition to adding our support and action with the constabulary and partners to save lives as part of the response to the COVID crisis. This clearly demonstrates that the police and crime commissioners and their officers have to balance the need to be able to get involved in and respond to the mission critical issues, not just the hot national issues of the day, whilst at the same time grinding through deep-rooted and complex issues that do not have a quick fix, whether that's a collaboration issue or like housing for offenders. I'm sure the panel will join me in thanking the Chief Constable for his attendance at the panel today, particularly as you will appreciate how busy the Chief Constable is and the constabulary at this particular time. As you will be aware, the Chief Constable willingly attends these panel meetings, given the interest the panel has shown through their questions on operational matters. It is evident that an effective, constructive working relationship between commissioners, chief constables and panels is more likely to be achieved where there is clarity of this understanding of roles and responsibilities, and that's in order to enhance community confidence in policing. However, and as it is stated in my report on my responses to the panel's questions, I would like to remind the panel that they do not hold the Chief Constable to account for operational policing. If there are any questions where we are not able to provide a full response today, that we will get back to you with that information. Thank you for allowing me to do that.
Thank you, Acting Commissioner. I think the introduction that you were referred to actually is to the item number 7, but I'm quite happy for us to move to item 7 and then back to 6.
No, I just wanted to read that out as an introduction. I wanted to now go on to the Police and Crime Commissioner's annual report.
Well, actually, sorry, it would make more sense if I think, as a follow-up, since you've introduced item 7, that we continue with item 7, and then we'll come to the annual report as item 6. If you're happy to do that.
I'm happy to do that.
Okay.
If that's the way you wish to go, but that was just
I think it makes more.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it makes more sense if you introduce the items separately rather than as to one. Otherwise, we'll end our cross purpose. I echo your thanks to the Chief Constable for joining us. The panel is very grateful for his devoting time to support you and to answer questions which inevitably overlap to some extent with operational matters. But I would, of course, remind panel members that we are asking questions of the Commissioner, not of the Chief Constable, and it is up to the Chief Constable whether he wishes to clarify or add detail to an answer from the Commissioner. But just so we're on item 7. Are there any issues? Are there any questions that were raised here that panel members would like further clarification on, or a supplementary question on? So if we start with, if we just go through this section 5, the follow-up from the last panel meeting, are members happy with the responses to these follow-ups? Take that as a yes. Item 6 is the delivery of the police and crime plan. Are there any issues, clarifications sought on any of this? No. Okay. I have one small clarification. So on page 61, in relation to the first phase of establishing a small IAG, which is the Independent Advisory Group, I just wondered if there was a date being set for that, since the target is to have this set up before the next election, which at the moment is due to be in May. Acting Commissioner, are you able to indicate a rough date when this will be set up?
Thank you. We've had some conversations around this, and we are hoping that with an advisor, this will be set up before the end of the year.
Okay, so by December, or by January, rather. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Hopefully.
Unless there's any other questions, I'll just have a follow-up on item 8.16, which is on page 64. This is in response to the reported increase in domestic abuse reports. In your response, Acting Commissioner, you've said that since that panel report, the rolling 12-month figure for recorded domestic abuse continues to increase. However, we cannot say if the increase is due to COVID or not. I would imagine that the monthly reports would give you a clearer picture on whether the increase has accelerated since April, May time. Are you able to confirm if that is the case or not?
Chair, it's the Chief Constable here. May I just assist the Commissioner?
Please, thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy if he's wishes to do that. Thank you.
So, Chair, in relation to domestic abuse, then nationally, there has been an acceleration in domestic abuse nationally. However, within Cambridgeshire, that increase has been slight. And when I talk about slight over the lockdown period, over the last few weeks, that's probably around 1% in terms of increase. So as at the last report, the analysis of domestic abuse couldn't really direct it down to lockdown. But what we have seen is indications that the numbers of domestic abuse incidents daily within the constabulary are now at a pre-COVID level. So the acceleration or the increase in domestic abuse longer term is probably sustained, but we have seen an increase in demand across the organisation as we've come out of lockdown, but bringing us back up to levels of demand where we anticipate to be, if that's any help.
Yes, that clarifies the picture somewhat. Thank you very much. So on the following question, which was relating to the response to the increased demand, I think you may have to some extent already answered this in the sense that the level of demand is now matches what was predicted. But the answer to the question essentially says that the OPCC is seeking additional funds, but are so far not finding additional funds to support this general increase in domestic violence. Is that a fair interpretation of the answer, Acting Commissioner?
Thank you. Actually, if I can hand that over to Jim, who will answer that question for you, if that's okay.
Please, thank you.
Yeah, if I could just clarify. So in terms of any additional demand as a result of COVID and the increased costs that our service providers have incurred because of COVID, obviously we've done an awful lot of work and brought in significant government grants to meet that. In terms of the long-term increase in domestic abuse reports, then we obviously have a county-wide approach to that in partnership with local authority, third sector and other people. And the requirements to deal with that are dealt with on a frequent basis, and the offer, if you like, is adjusted as we go through. So yes, we can always use more money, and we seek that money wherever we can, but ultimately the services that we provide are using that money to target the most high risk harm cases.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, the bottom line is, yes, if we could get more money, we would, and we would be able to provide more services. But in the reality is there has to be an element of triage to this.
Okay. Okay, well, this may be something we want to examine in more detail at a later date, but that's helpful to get a picture of where we're at the moment.
Thank you.
Thank you. So my final point on this section, unless there's any other issues that I would like to raise, it was in answer to the question about mobile phone data extraction. So this is item 10.1 on the page 65. My question was, given that the skills required in this digital cyber directorate are highly specialized and experience is hugely valuable, I just wonder whether this is a collaborated service or whether this is a unit solely within the Cambridgeshire Constabulary.
Thank you. This is a more operational answer that you require. So if I could ask the Chief Constable to come in and give that answer.
Jay, yeah, I can confirm it's purely a Cambridgeshire cyber directorate within the bounds of the organisation, not within the collaborative space.
Okay. I guess the question then is it worth exploring making this a collaborative service? Because it would seem to me that shared expertise in such a specialist area would be beneficial to all forces.
Joe, I'd have to say we're open to that suggestion. However, the expertise and the integral nature of all technological sort of investigations are really intrinsic to most investigations now. So the reason why the Cybercrime Directorate is formed is actually bringing together a number of different units, such as digital forensics unit, the cybercrime investigations, the digital management investigation, which sit now within Cambridgeshire Police under one directorate to make them more efficient and more effective in terms of the legislation and the standards, the ISO accreditation, which is coming over the horizon. So although we may seek to look to those opportunities in the future, my first port of call is to secure up Cambridgeshire as a service within the Cybercrime Directorate and to ensure that we take all the efficiencies out of Cambridgeshire before we look to any collaborative venture.
Okay, thank you very much. That's very helpful. Okay, so I'm not seeing any further questions from other members on this particular item. Oh, Councillor Massey.
Just a quick one, just to highlight question 9, the Southern Policing Hub update. It says that there'll be a requirement potentially to move to the new city location in early 2021. And so we're now coming out, unbelievable as it may seem, we're coming heading quite quickly the end of 2020. So at what point will the public be able to get to consult on the new location for the city centre?
Thank you. That depends on planning. So we have to actually go through the planning stage, but we are in discussions with different partners.
Chair, it's John Lee. I just wondered if it might just be worthwhile just perhaps adding a little bit of context, further context to what the acting commissioners outlined there. So we are in discussion at the moment in terms of co-location opportunities with other public sector partners within the city. So we're kind of down to perhaps a 2 or 3 options that we're looking at. And I think once we've got the clarity in respect of what those options look like, we will be able to kind of internally prioritise sort of what we think the preferred option might look like, and then with a view to come out to consult before any application goes in for planning anywhere on any of those options.
Can I just clarify as well that we're hoping early 2021 is when the planning application will be heard.
Just to clarify, is that the planning application for the new Milton hub, or are you talking about the planning application for the city centre?
That is the Milton.
Okay. So I think Councillor Massey's question was particularly about the city centre provision. And I understand that you're looking at co-location opportunities. Are you looking at both long-term and also interim options for that co-location? Because I can imagine it's going to be difficult to get a perfect alignment of transfer of functions.
That will be long-term. Okay. So we won't be moving into anywhere until the police decamp from Parkside. So we have a length of time that we can actually work with partners to ensure that it is long-term before it actually takes place.
Okay. Councillor Massey, did you have any? Yep.
Yeah, so the question really is, at what point will the public be consulted? So this isn't about the Milton planning, but about the potential options for the new location for the city centre. Will the public have an opportunity to be consulted on the options?
The community will be allowed to take and have an opportunity to participate in some community commissioning, so we can actually look at where that is going to take place. They will be informed, and it will be somewhere around the city centre, not too far from where it is now, hopefully.
So just to clarify, you said informed. Can we just be clear whether options will be offered to the public, or will it be a matter of you determine which option you believe is correct, and then informing the public of which option is your preferred option?
All the way through, the community will be consulted, so there will be some consultation with the community taking place.
Okay. Councillor Massey, are you satisfied?
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any other questions from panel members on this item of the agenda? I'm not seeing any hands. So if you're, well, are we happy to note the report? If you're not happy to note this report, could you please raise your hand? And I take it we are happy to note this report. Thank you. So moving backwards to item 6, the Commissioner's annual report. Back to you, Acting Commissioner, to introduce this item.
Thank you. So the purpose of this paper is to enable the panel to undertake statutory duty to review my report for April 2019 to March 2020. I would like to introduce my annual report. As you know, whilst I have only been acting commissioner for 5 months of this year's report that the report covers, I am extremely proud of what has been delivered in respect of the 4 themes of the Police and Crime Plan. As such, I wish to take this opportunity to thank the Chief Constable, his senior officer team, and all the constabulary officers, staff and volunteers and partners in their contribution to delivering the best possible service for our communities. As you have read in the annual report, you will know what it includes. A review of the work carried out over the last year to deliver the priorities set in the Police and Crime Plan, a summary of the financing and resourcing, an annual report on the Independent Custody Visitors Scheme. The majority of the content of this report you have seen through the year, and that's through numerous reports that have come out of the BCB, where you've had time to make comment on all of this information. So you had chance to support and to scrutinise this already. I would have had also, I would like to highlight a few of the key points of the year to March, if that's okay. First of all, I'd like to welcome the HMIC FRS Peel Report for the Constabulary published earlier this year. And you'll note that that is good in all 3 areas that have been assessed, which is fantastic improvement since the Chief Constable has been in place. Being able to increase the police officer numbers to record levels with the increase in the precept, as well as the national government investment, it is a fantastic achievement and enabling the constabulary to strengthen neighbourhood policing across the county. But it's important to remember this also brings pressures with additional training and other items that needed. We are celebrating 5 years of our Victim and Witness Hub. Our victim services continue to work hard to support victims of crime, and we continue to support them in access in additional funding for Cambridgeshire as they adapt to the new ways of working in time of great uncertainty. We have continued to support and invest a more preventative approach from the constabulary, refreshing its approach to out-of-court disposals and to the news service supporting young people away from getting involved in county lines exploitation. I welcome progress made with the Road Safety Partnership, which continues to provide preventative and educational road safety interventions, and now has a clear Vision Zero approach, aiming for a long-term goal of 0 road deaths and serious injuries. The Think Communities approach has very much been put into practice during the pandemic. As the country continues to deal with and then recover from the pandemic, there is no doubt that there are more challenges which lie ahead. But we have a strong foundation for the future in terms of strong partnership working across the county. I am happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Acting Commissioner. Can I just ask a quick question, not on the report itself, but about whether your office has conducted any research into how many people read the annual report and who. So, for instance, how many downloads of the report from the website, and if any research is done into who reads it.
That information isn't available at this time. I'm sure that some of our office will be able to take that and look at it and get that information back to you in the future, if that's okay.
Okay. Well, can I suggest that as a panel we make a recommendation that the Commissioner reports back on any research that has been done into who reads the annual report. Could I have a second for recommendation, Councillor Massey? Thank you. Okay, so Jane, if you could note that as a recommendation. So moving on to the annual report itself. Members, do you have any questions, comments, clarifications? Starting with Councillor Massey.
I have a number, so if it's okay, if I can suggest that we go through it as the report is, page almost section by section, and then see who else wants to talk about that section. Would that be okay?
Yes, I agree. Yep.
My first comment is actually on the contents page. I found it quite clunky and difficult to really understand. And my concern is that for those people who will read the annual report, who may only want to go to a specific point, for example, communities page or victims page, it's quite clunky to actually find that. So I would recommend that gets relayed out into a lot more normal contents layout.
Councillor Permission, do you have any comment on that?
Thank you for that comment. What I will do is we'll take that forward and we'll look at it. As you realise, this is actually a draft version and can actually be altered. And so things such as spelling mistakes and anything else we can actually alter, and we will be checking for that.
Well, actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to suggest that we note a list of recommendations, and then at the end of this, we as a panel agree or not agree to adopt those as recommendations. So if Jane, you could add reconfiguring or redesigning the contents page. On the basis that we've got this meeting. Sorry, I think somebody has a microphone not muted.
I just muted them, don't worry.
Okay, sorry, Councillor Massey, please continue.
Yeah, it's then following on to that from that the forward, which speaking actually, so the picture of Nick and Ray, if that could actually have a byline on it to actually say that that's who we're looking at, that would be quite lovely. Although hopefully people would know it's Ray from the front cover, but who knows? Just a point there. But I just wanted to highlight that I was really pleased that the acting police and crime commissioner is still highlighting the fact that we're one of the lowest funded forces in the country, and that the chief constable and the MPs are continuing to fight for fairer funding. So I just wanted to highlight the fact that I think that's a really good thing to put in there. It's really important that there's a transparency with the public, that we are one of the lowest funded, and that we are fighting for our communities to get the funding better. So I was really pleased to see that it was included. And then on the next page, which was said, what do police and crime commissioners do? I was disappointed that there seems to be elements there that are missing, and that element that is missing is to do with the community. That the police and crime commissioners, they are elected by the public to hold both the chief constables and the force to account, and to be answerable to the communities that they serve, and they ensure that community needs are met and improve local relationships and things like that. So the key word there is I've not got from this bit is that they're elected by the community to be that voice for that community and to be answerable to that community, and that's not what I'm getting from this section. What do police and crime commissioners do? So I didn't know whether to recommend to have another look at that.
If you have any comment, Acting Commissioner, otherwise we'll just note that as a recommendation.
It is noted.
Okay.
Following on for that, so then so that was on page 2 of the report. On page 4 of the report, when it says between April 2019 and March 2020, the Police and Crime Commissioner engaged in, and there's a piece of graphic there that says about how many Twitter impressions, etc., etc. Again, that's quite clunky. In order to be able to thoroughly read it, you have to turn your head at times. Because just that 18 media interviews is on the side, 3 MP meetings, etc., etc. So again, I don't know if that could be better laid out.
I think if we could make a general recommendation to ensure that legibility and accessibility is not lost through, or is not overridden by the graphic design. Yeah.
I've then moved on to page 5 of the report, and we're talking about money. Although the precept is mentioned in there at the final paragraph there, I think it is important to be in order to be more transparent, is to just maybe highlight the fact that we have had to raise the precept to maximum level year on year because of funding issues. So that was another recommendation.
Can I also add a recommendation on that particular item? So this, we're looking at page 6 of the annual report 22 of the agenda pack. One is what looks like a small mistake in that there's an asterisk next to the expenditure on grants, including supporting victims of crime. And that asterisk refers to we received in-year grants that had not been budgeted for, but I believe that should either be a double asterisk referring to the final outturn figure, or it should be referring to a footnote that's missing there. So that probably just needs just checking. But I'd also suggest that it would be more helpful to show the funding and the spend next to each other, because it's very difficult to compare things that are you can't at a glance see whether the budget expenditure exceeded or was within the funding budget. But also I think there's a slight confusion in the sense that we've actually got 3 figures at play here. We've got the budget that was set, there's the funding that was actually received, and there was the spending that was actually made, in other words, the outturn figures. So I think if this is to be really useful, it should include all 3, and they should be shown alongside each other in such a way that it's very easy to see whether the expenditure matched or exceeded the budget, and whether the funding matched or exceeded the budget. So can I just make that recommendation that all 3 figures are shown in such a way that it's easy to compare?
Chairman,
I'll make a note of
might
that.
I come in?
Yes, sorry, I can't see who.
It's Councillor Hazel.
Oh, Councillor Smith, yes, sorry.
Yeah. When talking about making the contents page and so on legible, and also that graphic, I believe if things are going up on the website, we have to try to make them work with web readers and assistive technology, which I hope that this has been designed with that in mind, because certainly that higgledy-piggledy contents page was difficult enough for someone with normal abilities to follow. Would have been very difficult for a screen reader, I think. So I hope something can be done about that. In the what does the Crime Commissioner do? I felt that one of the functions that the Crime Commissioner has is to give grants. It's outside of the police budget, and so it's an important part of what he does, the discretionary bit, and it is the largest spend on page 22 of the agenda. So I felt that ought to appear in that list of functions. And, yep. And then on, let me see, on page 31, hang on, is that where we are now? No, page 31, which is further on.
Should we come to that work? Because I think that's a couple of sections further on.
I'll come to that later, yeah.
So just let's make sure we've cleared off the section up to page 6, which is 22 of the report. Are there any? Have we covered all the points up to this page? Okay, so we're now on to page 7 or 23 of the agenda pack. Councillor Massey.
Yes, again, the graphic, very confusing, very difficult to read. Very difficult to understand what it actually means. And also, I think there's a typo with the total staff. It says 1.005. It obviously needs to read 1,005. And there's no mention as to how many admin staff we have. I think that's important to see that. But and in fact, you could kind of link that back to when we're talking about the numbers of police that we've increased, which I think it's a bit later on actually, so I'll mention that a bit later. But I think it's important to have all staff and have it broken out. If you're going to break it up the way it has been done, it's important to know what admin staff and what civilian staff, etc. you've got also.
Yeah,
but in general, the graphic needs looking at again.
Yeah, I think that there's a number of issues that we would like to identify with this. And what I'm going to suggest is that because the changes, I think, will need to be quite extensive because it's to make corrections as well as to clarify what's being expressed here, that it would be useful for, well, I'm not sure how we do this, but it would be useful to review an amended version of this before it's actually published. So one thing that's really not clear is that there is a segment of this which appears to be total staff, which is separate to the police staff and the PCSOs, but is in fact the sum of those two. But there is no, as far as I can see, there's no sum of police officers, and it wouldn't really make sense to show the sum and the components as separate items on the ring. I'd also like to suggest that we show figures for the full-time equivalents, not numbers of individual staff and officer members, because what actually matters in terms of ability to deliver service is the number of full-time equivalent positions that are filled. So I'm going to suggest we make that change to the numbers that are quoted. But also there needs to be clarification on, are the collaborated units, is that number included in the local police officers, or is it a separate number?
Thank you. I note that and I'll await your recommendations on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. It is very useful to see both the definition of what frontline policing means, what frontline officers, who counts as a frontline officer, and see that percentage, because I think to date we've never really had that as clearly expressed here. So that's a welcome addition to the report. Councillor Shellens.
Thank you. I need to go back. I'm sorry. I'm finding keeping track of where we are quite challenging. On page 20, we have that graphic which shows what the Police and Crime Commissioner did and with reference to listening. And if I add it up, we've got 18 media interviews and then 12 other things, which gets us to sort of 30. And that's one every 10 or 11 days. And that strikes me, in terms of listening to the public and taking their views and so on, as rather weak. And I wondered what the acting Crime Commissioner's aspirations were for this current year.
Can I just say that at the moment, this is the annual report of what has happened, and where we have plans for the future.
Okay, well, I think the question is do you accept that those figures are perhaps lower than the public might reasonably expect, and that your ambition is to increase the number of contacts up until well, for while you're in office?
And I recognise that some of it's difficult under COVID, but at the same time, we still need the same level of public involvement as one would look for. And I don't think we're getting it as reported for last year.
Can I just point you to the pieces of correspondence received and obviously responded to? That is 1,540.
Good. But you make a great play of having done media interviews, public surgeries, MP meetings, radio phone-ins and newsletters. And that seems feeble. And I particularly don't understand why the 3 newsletters only get to 20,000 people out of 670, 800,000.
What you have to remember is I've not been the person in this role for the whole year. I've only been in role for less than 5 months.
And I also accept, Ray, that there was an interregnum which delayed activity. So, that took a little time as well. But I'm talking about aspirations, really, because we can't amend the past. We can only look at what we're trying to achieve in the future. And I would have thought more public meetings of the sort that you listed would be very much in order, particularly given that the police are very much in the public eye at the moment, for better or for worse.
Yeah, we do get involved, and I do get involved with the public as and when approached, and we have other meetings, but people have subscribed to the newsletter as well.
Are you still able to conduct public surgeries? Are you managing to do those online?
Yes, we're doing those when people wish to take part in public surgeries.
Well, public surgeries are dates that you would publicise, so rather than responsive. So the question is, do you have a schedule of public surgeries going forward into the future?
We have in the past and we have in the future, yes.
Okay. Can I suggest that, given this is clearly an area of interest, that the panel asked for a short report to the next meeting, setting out your acting commissioners, your plans for public engagement going forward, particularly proactive public engagement. So
yes, I mean, I would have thought that there was plenty of opportunity for radio phone-ins, and meetings with the MPs would be important so that they can flag up to another place what the feeling of Cambridgeshire is. And as I say, the newsletter I find disappointing, frankly, in terms of its reach. And I'd be wondering what plans you have to improve that.
Okay, well, if we make that a recommendation for a report to the next meeting, could I just have a seconder for such a recommendation? Councillor Giles, thank you. So if we note that and move on. Did you have any other points you wanted to raise, Councillor Shallons? So you're on mute, I'm afraid.
Well, to be positive for a moment, I do think, I know it's strange, but I do think that the HMIC report, which the acting commissioners already referred to, deserves every commendation from all sides. And I was particularly pleased to see the 3 mental health nurses appointments, because I think that that's a very effective way of reducing the load on the constabulary, the direct constabulary direct, whilst giving the recipients perhaps a better quality of an insightful response than I would necessarily require off or expect off every policeman. So I think those are 2 points that I would where I would commend the action of the police. Thank you.
Yep, echoed. Thank you. Okay, so if we move on to page 24.8 of the annual report. Are there any comments on this? I believe Councillor Massey, yes.
Just that I actually quite like these graphics. So I just wanted to say that it's good to have these kind of graphics when we're talking about the kind of demand. In regard, however, we've had theft from a motor vehicle extrapolated, but we haven't had cycle thefts, and I presume cycle thefts has been put in there with all thefts. But cycle theft is, it's a bit different than a theft of a thing. It is a theft of some, a mode of transport. So I do wonder if we could get that data extrapolated and highlighted.
Acting Commissioner, does your office have that figure in a form that could be included here?
I'm happy with what is presented here, but if you wish to recommend that, then we'll look at that going forward. Okay.
I'd like to suggest that the addition of successful prosecutions as a statistic would be of public interest, given that I suspect that the number would be rather lower than many members of the public might expect. It probably needs some narrative to explain it, but I think as a metric of police performance, it is one of the most obvious that the public should be able to find here.
You'll find that page is on demand on policing, and but if you wish to have that put in as demand, then we'll look at that as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I think we're moving on to the next page, page 9 or 25 of the agenda pack. Councillor Massey.
Yes, so I just wanted to highlight the section where it says the comparison for the 2 reporting periods in relation to individual crime types are provided below. Some of them have been dealt with by just saying there's an increase of a percentage. Some of them have been given a figure and no percentage. I think it would be good to have a uniform either, or probably both, maybe it's increased by the number then the percentage, or one or the other, just to have a sort of a uniformed approach to reporting this. Because I note, for example, that the child sexual abuse has increased quite a bit, which is of a concern. And hate crime indeed as well. So I think it would be good if we could have a uniform way of reporting this. So either using both, which I think is good. Like, for example, there was a just under 40% increase in hate crime, with crimes up by 378. That kind of data is really useful. So that was something else I wanted to highlight. And in addition, the increase to stalking and harassment, which of course could be a result of the Home Office and how these offences have been recorded. That kind of information is useful because somebody's reading this and they saw that stalking and harassment has risen by 47%. Without that extra narrative would be quite real cause for concern for people. So it's really useful to have that sort of narrative in when there's a big increase, if there is a narrative to have had, of course.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that actually, given that on the next page there is a graphical representation of some categories of crime, that perhaps just for consistency, it would be good to report all categories of crime here and groups also shown with the absolute number of offences in 2018-19 and the absolute number in 2019-20, with commas to separate the thousands, just to make those easier to read, with a percentage increase or decrease, and then the narrative can pick up the numbers which are, which stand out and maybe need some explanation, rather than just repeating some of the statistics in the narrative. Does that make sense, Acting Commissioner?
Thank you for your comments. We'll take that on board.
Okay, thank you. Were there any other comments on this?
Yes, Chairman.
Councillor Sharp.
Yes, just one point really, and it may be difficult to get that information, is computer fraud, scam calls, that sort of thing. Obviously, we're now in more of a cashless society because of the lockdown. We were told to use cards rather than cash. I just wondered, and again, I just wondered if that information was around. Again, obviously, it's difficult maybe to put it in a geographical context, but I just wondered if there's any information on that.
Commissioner, do you want to respond?
But I can tell you that some people don't want to report that they've been the victims of fraud, and that includes businesses. When I had a meeting with the business community recently, and they were saying that some of the businesses do not want this to be reported because of their own embarrassment or may reflect on their business. Thank you.
If I can come back in, I can understand that, Acting Commissioner. It's something in previous times, domestic abuse was sadly hidden. Now, victims are being encouraged much more to go to victim support and obviously bring it out into the open. So hopefully people will not feel embarrassed, and because the more we can get this into the public domain, the more we can actually try and hopefully stop it.
And it would help with educating people, making people aware. So I think the recommendation that Acting Commissioner is that we would like there to be some mention and any statistics that are available and relevant on fraud and cybercrime, just to complete the picture on the reporting of crime here.
Yeah, can I just say that Councillor Massey will know that we're actually being out and we've been doing some communications with the public, parish councils, etc., on cybercrime. But I do have Jim who wishes to come in on this as well.
Thank you, Commissioner. Chair, could I just clarify in terms of the chart on page 10, those crime categories are the ONS crime categories, and obviously they are amalgams of, in some cases, 10, 15 different types of offence. Yeah. So when the recommendation is made, could you ask your support team there to be pretty clear in terms of which of the specific crimes like fraud that you would like reporting on? Because for us to present the full crime stats, it would probably be a full page of very small writing for us to do all of them. So it's just flagging for you, as I say, that the format of that is the broad categories of crime counting by ONS.
Okay, I understood. I think we're not necessarily asking for additional categories to be reported, but just for them all to be reported in a consistent way. So I completely understand that what you've reported there is consistent in its own right with the Office of the ONS reporting standards. So maybe the question, maybe it would be, maybe it needs another section which says example crimes or extracted categories that just displays those in the same way, so that it's clear to people how to interpret them.
Would it be helpful then on the previous page where some of the other ones are broken down, if we include the fraud and cyber there?
Yes, if that's the most appropriate place. If they're not in there with the constabulary statistics in the table, then yes, that probably would make sense. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Giles.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, likewise, I think drugs deserves some form of mention in this report. There's very, very little content about that. So, my own observations.
Yeah, so it gets one line, all drug offences, which perhaps slightly surprisingly is not reported in the ONS data as an item. And it's actually not all that clear which category it would fall within. I'm guessing it goes within other crimes against society.
Yes, but Chairman, you know, at the end of the day, as I said previously, members of the public are probably more interested in cases of drug abuse, etc., and cybercrime than they are about some of the other offences. You know, they're the important ones.
Yeah, so I just was seeking clarification on whether drug offences should be reported as a separate item in the ONS stats, or whether it is included within other crimes. Acting Commissioner,
Yeah, Chair, it's Jim Haley. Yes, it is in the other crimes against society, the drug offences.
Okay. So I think for the public's ease of interpretation, it kind of would make sense to show some example categories within these, so that people understand how they're related. Because at the moment, it's not at all obvious how the individual crime types fit within these ONS categories. So I'm not sure we can necessarily provide you a detailed description of how it should be, but perhaps if we just recommend that it is clarified for the benefit of a public who don't necessarily know about categories and how those how those are defined.
Yes, that's fine, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I just had a couple of points on this page, so that we're still on the tackling crime page 9 of the annual report. The introductory paragraph doesn't quite make sense. I think it probably needs to start with although. So in other words, although the number of offences recorded as crimes by the constabulary increased by 6.1%, the overall crime rate remains low. In other words, there's a contrast here, which makes sense, but not if you begin a sentence with. And the other one was that the general public won't necessarily know that ONS stands for Office for National Statistics, so it might be worth just expanding that at the beginning and putting ONS in brackets, if it's referred to again. So those are just quite small points. I think that we had some points on page 10 for Councillor Massey.
Yeah, just to quickly go back to scams, I think scams do need highlighting just to be able to reinforce the message that they should be reported on. And I do note, though, later on in the report, there is a mention of the work that's been going on with scams, which is good. In regards to page 10, I've got the final paragraph says the development of a new website as part of the Single Online Home National Project continues to be under review. It's not quite clear what those objectives are, because we've just had a new website, although I know that we are tweaking the website. And so is there a concern that we might have lost some money on the website if we've now got a new national guidance, etc.? The other point was, is it worth having, in regards to the average time to respond, the number of dropped calls, as well as maybe the number of online reports? So that the average time to respond, these are to the phone calls, but as we know that the public are able to contact the police in many different ways nowadays, including the online reporting. So it might be worth having in there sort of the average time to connect or to respond online, or the number of online reports as well.
Acting Commissioner, do you want to respond?
Yes, we can look at that as well, about adding that. We'll take that forward. Thank you, if that's a recommendation.
Okay. Did you have any comment on the website, though, as to whether the new single online home is going to obviate some of the work that's been done on the constabulary's website?
Jim would like to come in on this. If I can hand over to Jim, please.
Thank you.
Yeah, the Single Online Home is the national standardised website for all forces, which gives a lot more functionality than existing websites. But I think in terms of if you have any detailed questions on that, then I think it's probably more likely that the Chief will be able to provide the latest position.
Okay.
So, Chair, it's the Chief Constable here. In relation to Single Online Home, as you say, it's a national platform which has been introduced by a number of forces, not just within Cambridgeshire, but the sentiment across our collaboration with Bedfordshire and Hertfordshire is key to that implementation across BCH and clearly Cambridgeshire is the integration with our crime system. That has not been secured yet, and hence why we have delayed our implementation of Single Online Home. We're constantly reviewing it, and our aim to implement Single Online Home is probably around the early part of the next financial year in April, May. But considerable talks are ongoing with the integration part. That in itself will bring in several efficiencies, not least double keying of crime systems. Early reports from other Athena forces, such as Essex, they have taken Single Online Home and they are double keying and being relatively inefficient. So we want to avoid that. That's why we've had to invest in the website to take us through to that transition stage between now and the implementation of Single Online Home. Single Online Home may well be upfront costs initially higher than what we pay now on our website, but the benefits realisation of several systems linked to that system should provide overall benefits realisation in the long term.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarification. Do we have any other comments? I just wanted to, so Councillor Massey mentioned that it would be useful to have the online contacts reported here. I wondered also if there are any statistics we could include here that go beyond just the seconds to answer a call, because actually what matters to somebody is how long it takes to get their report resolved. So in other words, if they've called up and somebody answers the phone and then they're put on hold for another 20 minutes or something before they can speak to the person that can actually deal with their call or whatever else that might delay. I think the public, because my worry is that the public will see that and they think, well, that's not what I'm hearing from other people who are using the 101 service, for instance. So I kind of think we need a bit more transparency and honesty in what is the user's experience in terms of how long it's taking them to get a matter resolved through, particularly through the 101, but also through the online reporting. So if we could just make a recommendation to get a bit more transparency on the performance of those services. Can we move on to the next section? So we're now on to the section of the report on victims. Do we have any comments? It's Councillor Massey. Oh, sorry. Apologies. Councillor Shannon, you had your hand up. Sorry, you're muted, but I take that to say you're no longer. Right. I'll lower your hand. Sorry, Councillor Massey.
I just wanted to say on page 12 of the report, so 28 of the reporting pack, again, it's already been highlighted, the excellent work having the 3 mental health nurses has, the amazing work that the 3 mental health nurses has done and what they've brought to the police commissioner's staffing office. And the information in this report that says that they supported 8,000 incidences, I think really needs to be highlighted, maybe even in a separate box, because I think that's amazing news that those 3 members of staff has managed to take the pressure off the policing element of mental health by that much. That's an enormous amount of people that's been supported, or incidences that have been supported. So I didn't know whether the Commissioner would like to highlight that even more so in his report, because I think that's something that the public do need to know.
Did you have a comment on that, Commissioner?
Thank you. I agree that actually what the mental health nurses do and the number of calls that they take and the support that they give to the force is absolutely fantastic. So yes, we can look at highlighting that more.
Thank you. I just had a couple of comments on this particular page. There are some paragraphs which I feel don't really add much to the content. I mean, for instance, operators responding to both 999 and 101 calls respond to calls for service based on the level of risk involved. I'm not sure that really tells the public anything very useful. And there are a few paragraphs and sentences of that type, which I think if were removed, would potentially shorten the report, but just make it a little bit more digestible, should we say. But I also think terms like county lines, although I think we are now all familiar with what that means, I don't think we can assume the general public necessarily knows what county lines means. So I think definitions of specialist terms like that is important in this report, either in a glossary or on a box out on the page or something, but just in a way that makes this report as accessible as possible. If there are any further comments on that page, so moving on to next page, or any other comments on the victim section of this report? Councillor Massey.
So I'm now looking at page 13, so 29 of the report pack, and again, similar to the suggestion of maybe a highlight or a boxed out section, I think the modern day slavery paragraph should be highlighted, and the bespoke based emotional support to 2,751 people could potentially be highlighted better too in the report. On another vein, in the specialist services co-located within the hub, it says that 73% of the 246 young victims of crime reported that they were better able to cope with their everyday life as the result of the support. But it doesn't detail about what about the other 28%, what happened to them, what support did they need, or maybe they didn't want any. But you know, it actually, that statistic gives more questions than it has answers there. So, you know, my immediate thought was, well, what about the rest of people? What happened to them? Whether that needs another paragraph or there needs some sort of explanation, I think that could be useful for people. And then again, a total of 170 victims self-referred to the service, with 58 going on to report a crime to the police. That's a lot of people who didn't go on to report a crime to the police. And so what were the self-referrals, what were the, I can't even read my own writing here, but I think, what did it say? It says, why were they self-referring? You know, what was the reasons? Why did they not follow through? Was it because it maybe might not have been applicable for them to call the hub? That kind of thing. I think that kind of information would be useful. Maybe not here, maybe that's something that we need to look at separately. But I want that, as I say, this statistic again gives a whole load of questions rather than it does answers.
Can I just say that not all people who self-refer are referring in relation to crime. They're just looking for the support that they can get.
But that's what I mean. It would be useful for the report to say that, because otherwise it leaves people with questions. But so if that was explained a bit better, I think then that would be sufficient.
Yeah, I think because it does say a total of 170 victims self-referred. I think that automatically implies that they are victims of crime, who then don't, but a significant proportion of whom, or a majority of whom, don't then go on to report the crime. So I think it is just a clarification of wording there to make sure that is understood correctly. Councillor Massey, did you have any other thoughts on victims?
On victims, yes. I forgot we were still on victims. Yes, on page 14, which is 30 of the report pack, just the question again that the over the 12 months, the Constabulary reported 77.2% of victims of crime said they were at least satisfied, which does give you, although it says there's improvements in satisfaction rates, but there has been some notable deterioration in satisfaction for different other violent crimes. I think we'd need to know, I presume that there was different levels. You know, I'm very satisfied, I'm more than happy, I'm not satisfied, I'm dissatisfied, etc. I think that kind of statistic makes me wonder what the other categories were. So again, maybe a bit more explanation, I don't know, or maybe just a rethink of the wording on it for that section. And I'm just trying to see if there's any more on victims before. No, that's it, victims.
Thank you. We can have a look at that.
I think it's just important to bear in mind that a member of the public who comes in to see this report, and if they're only seeing, they may be one of the 23% who are not satisfied, and I think somehow that needs to be addressed. There needs to be something here that explains, what the constabulary, what the commissioner is doing to try to address to assist those who do not feel they've been adequately supported. So I think it's just important that they're not, they don't sort of fall down a gap. That they're not just the unspoken part of the statistic. Councillor Shannons.
Thank you. There's the page at the beginning of the victim section has a magnificent picture of our acting commissioner and another person. Do we know who that person is? This is not a major point, but it just was a question in my mind. Should I recognise him?
Yes, this is the head of the Victim and Witness Hub.
I think it would be helpful if it said that somewhere. It may do. If so, I've just missed it.
Yeah, we can look at that. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're up to page 15 of the report now. Councillor Massey, I think you had a question about the.
We're on the offenders, aren't we?
Is that no? That's still victims. This is the crime and disorder reduction grants.
Only one that no, I don't think so. Actually, not now that rethinking it. I think it's okay actually.
Okay. So moving on to the. So I think we're okay. So we've covered the victims section of this. Anybody has no more questions on the victim section? Okay, so moving on to the offenders section of the report. Are there any comments or observations on the offenders section? Councillor Massey.
Yes, just on the page 1834 of the report pack, it speaks in the penultimate paragraph about the use of out-of-court disposals, and then it speaks again to talk about the grant of 30,000 to Peterborough's outside link service, but it doesn't tell us the outcome, and it doesn't tell us if it's been successful. So I think that would be useful in that paragraph there, just to say what the outcome were, or maybe if we don't know the outcome yet, because it's too soon to mention that we'll be monitoring the outcomes of this.
Commissioner,
can I just say that will be an evaluation of this work? As with any grants, we will do an evaluation.
Okay. Well, I think that's something that we'll pick up as a panel. I think we'll leave it to you as to whether it's worth reporting on the successes of where known of grants like this in in the annual report. Councillor Warwick.
Hello, sorry, it's really awkward when you're trying to get your notes up and do everything else. So my question is, hang on, 1935. So it's page 19, so it's 35 in the report. It says here that a successful bid for almost £400,000 of funding from the Government Early Intervention Youth Fund, led by the Commissioner's Office, is now in place to support young people from getting involved in knife crime. The money funds a team of specialist workers that help young people with complex needs who are at significant risk of criminal exploitation and youth violence. I think it'd be good to have some clarification exactly what they're doing and how successful that's looking, or some sort of, I don't know, some bit of an idea of exactly what £400,000 has been spent on and what we're looking as outcomes for that, please.
Sorry, are you looking for us to put this in the report or to bring it through BCB, the Business Board?
So I'm looking for clarification of exactly what's the team of specialists, what are they doing?
So I think the Commissioner's question is it, are we requesting this additional detail to go into the annual report, or would we as a panel like to see this perhaps in a future report?
Probably both, maybe, because I definitely would like to know, and I'd imagine some other people are going to want to know what £400,000 has been spent on.
Yeah, I believe I've got Christina, who would like to come in and talk there.
Hello. Yes, this work is working through the Youth Offending Service, and they've got a team of specialist workers who can work intensively with young people, including specialist psychologists and that sort of thing.
Okay. Well, I think given that we've raised this, the issue of the effectiveness of some of these funding arrangements, perhaps that's a subject for a future report to the panel, just so that we're confident that the monitoring of the outcomes of these grants is effective. Councillor Shellens.
Thank you. Am I heard?
Yes.
Good. Page 35 of the report. Nationally, the MOJ continues to recognise employment as a key route out of reoffending following the launch of its prison education and employment strategy in 2018. I'd quite like some information as to how effective Mr. Bisbee feels that this is, or this has been, and does he share my gloom when looking at potential unemployment rates of in excess of 10% in the current year and years thereafter?
Thank you. I mean, it has been shown that people who come out of prison who have got jobs and homes are less likely to offend. But is this something that you wish to have in a future report? Well,
my concern is there ain't going to be the employment opportunities. So is this initiative by MOJ going to fall in a heap? I put it somewhat crudely, and
I'm hoping not. I'm hoping that these people will have some work to go to. We are working, or the criminal justice are working with some businesses to try and help people so that they don't reoffend.
Okay, well, I'm going to suggest that we bring this to a future panel meeting, because I this is going to be an increasingly live issue, and I think we need to be monitoring it. So I think if we note this for this particular item, this issue, for a future meeting.
Thank you.
Any other comments on the offenders section of this report? Okay, so I think we then move on to communities, which starts on page 38 of the Agenda Pack 22 of the annual report. Councillor Massey.
Yeah, first of all, as much as I think it's really important to highlight the work that's been done to stop scams, just maybe have another look at whether the stop scams would be relevant for the community's title page. It's just a suggestion. It's obviously, you can ignore it if you like. And also put a date in it. When I look at it, it's funny, isn't it? We've been in COVID now, living with COVID for 6 months, and you look at it and you go, oh my God, social distancing. But in any case, I think we're looking at community things, and it's got the big thing saying stop scams. So I'm just wondering whether that's relevant or not. Moving on from that onto page 23 or 39 of the report pack, I am pleased to see that the information there is about some of the scam work that you've been doing. And again, maybe some of that needs to be highlighted and put into a different box to highlight it, including further information about the Good Sam, the successful trial of the app Good Sam, which actually I'm not sure I knew what it was. So if I don't know what it is, then a member of the public won't know what it is, and that does deserve highlighting. And also because I don't actually know what it's for, so a bit of a clarification on that would be good, because if this is something that's being successful, we need to be telling our residents about it.
Thank you. It does actually inform you down the bottom of the page on the right hand side what Good Sam is, and actually you've received this a report on this in the BCB yourselves.
I think it's more just highlighting it in such a way that it stands out for the public, because it's although we may now know what Good Sam is, there's and I appreciate that the report does explain what it's useful for. I think perhaps just a little bit of detail about how it operates and how it is useful would perhaps make it easier for the public to understand the significance of it, because I think this is a very good news story, and I think that would be it'd be worth picking that out a bit more, highlighting it a bit more.
Thank you, I note that.
Do we have any other comments on the community section?
Yes, on page 25, which is 41 of the report pack, he mentions the ethics challenge panel, which is a very good thing. However, it doesn't say who was selected, how they were selected, the diversity, and how a member of the public can attend or volunteer. Again, I was aware that the ethics challenge panel was there, but as a member of the public, they won't. And it's a really important, particularly this day and age in 2020, this is something that again needs to be highlighted and explained a bit better. It would definitely sort of a few more options on there about how people were selected, etc. needs to be looked at, I think.
Yeah, can I just say that this is actually a constabulary panel under a DCC?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's just asking for a bit of clarification, because the general public won't know or understand what its role is, and so just
yeah, and it says the panel's represented by members of the public.
Yeah. So its function and how the public gets to be involved in it, I think, are two quite important questions for the public. I mean, perhaps as a general recommendation, it would be worth passing this report to someone who knows nothing about policing to get their response, because I think there would be quite a lot of technical terms and sort of inside knowledge that we might not even notice that would get picked up in that way. And given that this is a report for the general public, I think those sorts of areas do need to be clarified. I just had, there's a reference to think communities. So at the top of page 25 of the report 41 of the agenda pack, second paragraph down on the second column, there's for more information on think communities, see page 32. I think that actually should be page 31. When I looked, it was page 31 where there's more information on that. It's just one of those things that might not get picked up in proofreading. Are there any other comments or observations on recommendations on this? Okay, so I think so the transformation section, are there any questions on that section? Any suggestions? No, I take that. And anything on the contact us page? The only thing I noticed is that the web address for the Commissioner's website has a spurious / in it, which well, there's an inconsistency in that some of them are listed with HTTPS : / but this one has www./ which it shouldn't. So, but anyway, hopefully issues like that will be picked up in the proofreading. Okay, so unless there's any points that people want to go back to, any points in this report, then I think, oh, sorry, Councillor Massey.
I was just going to ask if we could move on to the appendices. I've got a question on one of the appendices, and that's it on the report then. Oh yes, sorry, yes, okay, yes. Yep, moving on to the appendix. So this would be page 68 of the report pack, I believe. I'm trying to see what, oh, it's the stop and search data. So it's Appendix 1. The stop and search data is actually an appendix to the item 7, which okay, we can go back to that. I get there. If I could just quickly mention something then. I must have missed it when we went to there. Well, no, we'll come back to that. Let's sign off on the complete the annual report, so we get the recommendations on that. So, did you have any comments on the appendix to the annual report? No other members. Okay, so so we now have a collection of recommendations and suggestions for the Commissioner's Office for changes to the annual report. Since we've all heard what those are, unless there are any points that anyone wants to object to in recommending, I'm going to take it that we as a panel endorse those recommendations to the Commissioner. So unless I see any hands to the contrary, okay, so we're going to note this report with the recommendations discussed, which will be detailed in the minutes and also in the action points to the Commissioner's Office.
I noted those and thank you for your scrutiny of the annual report to understand whether the objectives set out in my plan have been met. Thank you.
Thank you, Acting Commissioner. Okay, so now we're going to go back forward to item 7. So there was an appendix to item 7, which is the report on the stop and search data. Acting Commissioner, was there anything you wanted to add as an introduction to that particular item?
No, just if you'd like to go to questions, thank you. Okay,
so Councillor Massey.
Yeah, my question was, so the data for 2019 has been given per 1,000 people in Cambridgeshire in section 2.5. However, the data for 2019 to 2020 is given in a quite confusing, it's been broken down per month, per ethnicity, etc. And I was wondering if we could actually get that per 1,000 people in Cambridge, like it's been reported elsewhere, just for consistency. Because otherwise it's very difficult to be able to compare from one year to the next if it's been reported in 2 different ways.
Thank you. Can I just say that whilst I have statutory responsibilities for complaints process oversight, I am actually looking at an independent scrutiny panel, which will be hopefully ready towards the end of this year, as you've already been informed. Yep. I've already had a conversation with my team and the Chief Constable to commission some academic work around stop and search and to gain better understanding and clarity around the local figures. In October, the Chief is launching his Ethics, Diversity, Equality and Inclusion strategy. So there is quite a lot going on about this, and we will look at how it is reported to you.
Thank you, Acting Commissioner. Does that answer your question, Councillor Massing?
Yes, as long as, are we able to request that it does come back to be reported in that manner so that we can at least compare?
Yes, you can make that request. Thank you.
Okay, so well, given this is a separate recommendation, can I just have a seconder for requesting this data in a consistent format? So thank you, Claire George. So unless there are any objections to making that as a recommendation, then we will. I think we also have to be mindful that we are not here to scrutinise this data. We are, our role is to be sure that the Commissioner is asking the right questions about it. So I think we have to rely on. We have to remember that is what we're scrutinising, not the data itself. And in any case, the data does take some interpretation. I think we have to trust that when it is scrutinised and found to be, not identify anything of concern. And I think that we need independent evidence to the contrary. Okay, so I think if we note, the panel is happy to note that appendix to the item. So moving on to item 8. So this is the decisions by the Acting Commissioner. Unless there's any points that you wanted to raise on this, Acting Commissioner, I will go straight to questions.
No, I think if you look, there is only one decision record that is mentioned. Thank you.
Yeah. Are there any questions on this? There is also included in this a summary, as we've requested, a sort of standing item that reports on the state of constabulary assets or commissioner of OPCC assets, which are currently being considered for sale or reuse and so on. So unless there are any questions on that. Okay, then I take it that the panel is happy to note this report. I see no objections. Thank you. So that takes us to the end of the scrutiny of the Acting Police and Crime Commissioner. So I'd just like to thank you, Acting Commissioner, and your staff and the Chief Constable. Thank you very much for your time and for your contributions to this meeting. You are now free to leave as we conclude the meeting with just panel matters.
Yes, can I just thank you for your scrutiny today? But I'm just wondering, the panel is also there to support, and as you know, we are in a very worrying state at the moment with COVID. And we are working with the LRF and the SCG, who are the governing bodies that are looking at COVID in our local area and report to everybody. and we actually share the messages that come out of there so that we all have the same message. And I'm wondering if, as a panel, whether you have actually been sharing these messages, and if not, is that something that you could take on board as a panel and ensure that the safety of our community is enhanced and the messages are getting out there to the community that we represent?
That certainly sounds like something that we could and should be doing. In what form do these messages, I mean, are these email newsletters, or what form are these messages originating?
They are coming out from the LRF, the local response.
The LRF, just remind me what LRF stands for.
That's the Local Resilience Forum.
Yeah, okay. So who is on the mailing list for the local, I mean, are all councillors on the mailing list for that?
All your councillors should know about this, and you will have seen in the council briefings that those messages are going to all councillors. And I just wonder if you could, as a police and crime panel, ensure that this is shared through your councils and through the panel itself.
I'm not on a mailing list for those, so I wouldn't receive them. So.
Okay, but can I just confirm, I mean, could you raise your hand if you're a councillor and you do not receive these notifications? So I'm seeing some hands go up. So can we make an action point then, Jane, to liaise with the OPCC to find out?
What was that called again, Barry? What did you say it was called? Local Resilience.
It is the Local Resilience Forum and Forum, and actually all councils are part of this. Yeah. They are represented on the SCG, and as such, I would ask that all councillors contact their media teams and ensure that this is being shared, because it is important that we get the message out there that COVID is a very serious thing that we're dealing with, and there are the actions that have been asked of everybody from councils right the way down to the general public, and we'd like to see that passed out to the public by yourselves as well, especially if you know people who are very hard to reach in your areas.
Yep, Councillor Giles.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Is this, Ray, the same briefing that we have come from the county council, more or less on at least a weekly occurrence, or is this an additional information pack?
This is the one that all councils, the regionals as well, should all be getting those weekly updates, and it comes through Gillian Beasley. So maybe you should contact her office and ask for those briefings to be forwarded to all your members as well.
All right, Councillor Massey, do you?
I think we do get it, but I'm not sure, because it's a weekly update on COVID. Is that the one that you're talking about?
Sorry, yes, that's the one.
Right. Okay. Well, what I suggest is we, if Jane, you can just take as an action point just to confirm that all councillors are in fact receiving.
I've just been given the Peterborough link to that forum, so I can get it for us and then take it from there.
Okay. So I mean, it sounds like it's something that should be
that the messages are. It's just to make sure that all the messages that come out for the public can get a wider support by yourselves. Yep. And if you maybe if you've got a web page, you can actually share it on there through your communications too.
Yes, we have rather limited communications, but I take the point, and certainly council members can and should be doing their part in spreading the message. So okay, we'll take as an action point to do what we can to make sure the message is going out as widely as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you for raising up.
Can I just thank the officers from my office and also the Chief Constable and his officers for attending today. And thank you and good afternoon.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Okay, so moving on to item 9 of the agenda. This is the update on the Eastern Network meeting. So we meet with other panels from the Eastern region, and we compare notes and to kind of share best practice and ideas and so on. The main item that we discussed was about the conference. We suggested that it would be most sensible for the conference to be held entirely online rather than planning for it possibly to be, or what would actually end up being a hybrid conference, so that a relatively small number of people would attend and then other people could attend online. We suggested that the planning for that would just be too complex and probably wouldn't give people a very good experience. But I don't believe that we've yet got a confirmation of whether that's going to happen. So we'll let you know as soon as a decision is made on that. Jane, I think I'm right that we've booked 4 places, but we can book more, and obviously if it's online then presumably there'll be an unlimited number.
What she's said to me is what they're looking at now is that it will definitely be online. We've gone back to Scarman House because of the technical side of things. She wouldn't know where to start, so she's relying on them, but she wants to do it over 3 days, so you'll get more for your money. And they'd be able to get more speakers because obviously there's not the travel implications and that sort of things. People that weren't available before would now be available. You'd be able to go to more workshops and there'd be a lot more to do, but you'd have to do it over 3 days, which is fine. But for us, it falls on the Wednesday of our panel meeting. Typical. So we'd have to look at moving that, which I haven't done yet because obviously I wanted to speak to the panel first. It is 3 full days, which is a lot at the same time. I mean, you know what it's like when you're on here for 2 hours or longer. But they are looking at some to be confirmed key speakers that would be interesting, but it is 3 days. And I asked her, would it be open to more people? And she said she'd have to come back. She'd have to confirm with the conference people and things like that. So there's no definites yet of anything, and no definites as to whether it's open to more people. And from the sounds of things, I don't know what the costing's going to be. So it's all still up in the air, but it looks like it's going to be a 3-day event. We have 4 places at the moment. So yes, Nikki.
So my question would be, because most of us councillors have back-to-back meetings on every single day, would there be an option for one of our subs to maybe come in and out for bits of it, so that we're not necessarily, it's not maybe me there for 3 days, but maybe my sub will attend for some of it?
That would be easier to do, wouldn't it? It's not something I thought of, but yeah, you could chop and change. I don't know, something I would have to ask. I don't know how they're going to work it. Is it big enough for us to want to change our Wednesday meeting on I think it's 25th of November, because that would be the last day. Is it something you would want to change that date to the following week? I don't know. I didn't take it upon myself to just change that date.
If we know that it's going to clash, then I think we should at least investigate whether there are other dates that we could consider.
Yeah.
But obviously we don't have that much. Well, I suppose it's 2 months, so the panel meeting could be a week earlier or a week later, I suppose.
I think a week later because we go into December, don't we?
Yeah. But probably not more than a week later.
I rely on Fiona with her dates. Hence the reason you'll see, and I'm skipping here, I'm sorry, to the, there's a new date in the calendar for, and we're really going ahead here to, is it June 21? Because the date there is dependent on Fiona because she has jury service and I have to get the date in before she's taken away from us. So that's why that date's in there. I wouldn't normally go that far ahead, but...
Yes, that's quite advanced notice, isn't it? Well, can I suggest that you investigate alternative dates for the November meeting and a provisional date for the June 2021 meeting?
Okay.
So that we've at least got options there, and then when we know what the
I'll let you know. I'll let you, the panel obviously know as soon as I hear back from Anne. But I would like to think it'd be sooner rather than later, obviously, because it's creeping forward. So
well, obviously we need to know whether the Ray is available. So if we can check dates with his office first.
Yes, of course. Just as I get a date, something always happens and I always have to move it.
Yes. I mean, do we have to stick to Wednesdays? I mean, I know that's generally the case, and that's presumably to avoid clashes as far as possible. But I think we have held meetings on other dates successfully. So
we have in the past. I don't know whether it's an easier day for them, or I know it doesn't clash for us for council. I don't think it clashes for. It doesn't clash for you either, does it, Fiona? For CAMS either for council.
No, mostly Tuesday and Thursday, CAMS meeting dates, and Peterborough's Mondays and Wednesdays. No, Mondays and Wednesdays, yes, occasionally. Fridays are the other day that potentially you could do, I think, probably. I don't know about the other district councils, of course, because they've got their own schedules.
Well, I'll try my best and have a look and see who's doing what. I tend not to try on a Friday afternoon. I don't think anybody likes a meeting on a Friday afternoon.
Probably not the best, no. Okay, if we can look at some alternative dates, because it looks like if we don't, we're going to miss out on what might be a good day of the conference.
Yeah, potentially.
As far as other reporting on the Eastern Network meeting, I can't call to mind sort of a quick summary of it, but it would actually make sense to circulate notes from the meeting. So, Jane, I don't know if you take.
Anne sent me some, so I'll ping those around. I'm sure she sent me some.
Okay, so if you could send them to me, and then I'll pick out what I think might be worth sharing with the rest of the panel. Councillor Smith, did you have a question?
You're on mute.
Sorry, just to let Jane know that South Cambs has full council on Thursday, the 26th. So
right,
November.
Not to choose that one, but a week before or a week after would be okay.
Okay.
Councillor Wigan.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It was just to say that Friday the 27th is an all-day combined Peterborough and Cambridgeshire Employment Committee interviews. So that would be.
Yeah, okay. I'll avoid Fridays.
Are there any other dates?
Fridays, just not that one.
Yeah. Are there any other dates that people know are not going to work? Just so we've got you here to inform Jane. Okay. So we've dealt with item 9. Item 10. So this is a proposal for a task and finish group to review the panel working arrangement. So we had a reasonably detailed discussion about this at the last meeting. Since then, Jane has put together a brief terms of reference, which was emailed to everyone this morning, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which really just sets the scope of the group and the membership. The membership is not closed, so if there's anybody who is not listed there but who would like to volunteer, please let Jane know. Is that acceptable? Or do we actually have to finalise the membership now? Just aware that we don't have all members with us now.
I think we have to finalise now, don't we, Fiona? Yeah, she's nodding. You're on mute. Yes.
So was that a yes? Definitely. We need to get the membership finalised now. Okay. So is there anyone on the present now who is not listed but would like to be on the working group?
Or is listed that doesn't want to be on there?
Or yes, or who is listed by mistake? Jane, could you just read out the names of the people who are listed, just in case?
Councillor Massey, Councillor Wiggin, Councillor Warren, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Daunton. Obviously, she's not here at the moment, and Claire.
She's happy with it.
Yeah, and Claire George.
Okay, so no additions or subtractions from that. Okay, so all we need to do as a panel now is to adopt the terms of reference and to formally set up the task and finish group, which can then go and meet in its own time. So unless there's any other questions or clarifications on that, can I just have the panel's support, or can you indicate if you have an objection to setting up this task and finish group? Not seeing any objections. So so therefore the panel is therefore formally instigating this task and finish group, which will then meet to elect a chair and determine how it will work. We provisionally set that it will report back in January. I think November probably is too soon, particularly as it's quite difficult to organise meetings at the moment. But that's it's kind of up to the group to recommend a later date if that becomes necessary. But perhaps an update on progress at each of the panel meetings while it's formed would be useful. Okay, so have I covered that adequately, Fiona?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so item 11, meeting dates and agenda plan. I think we've covered the dates. Jane, I think you've already circulated calendar invites for the dates. So it's just a possible revision to the November date and a revision to the June date that we're
I don't know if I've anything out for that June date. I've just put it in there for now, but I will send an invitation to the June 21 date.
Okay. Do any panel members have any suggestions for what we should be requesting for the agenda and reports for the next meeting? The process that we use at the moment is that we simply refer back to the last BCB meeting reports and base our questions on that.
Edward, I noticed that Susan's not here, but she mentioned about that 400,000.
Yeah.
Claire's nodding, Claire George is nodding. And there was, what was this one? Something that Mike Shellings asked. Is he still here? Is he gone? Oh, he disappeared as well. Oh, he's not, his camera's there, but he's not. Oh. He asked about something to do with the, I've written, is it Ministry of Justice, how effective that was to do with those coming out of prison and their jobs?
Yes. There was also a question about the Commissioner's communication strategy going forward.
So I don't know whether anybody wanted to do, I mean, I know that, I don't know whether you, as a panel you wanted to carry on doing this or whether you wanted to go deeper into more of a report side of stuff. I don't know how you want to take things forward.
In asking for more reports.
Say again, sorry.
As in asking for more reports.
Yes.
Chairman, can I come in here?
Yes, certainly.
Just want to raise a point that was discussed earlier on in relation to the mental health nurses and 8,000 incidents that were recorded. I'd like to know a bit more detail because I do find that quite worrying that we've got a workforce of 1,000, 2,000 people and there's 8,000 incidents, and it'd be good to understand you know, is there a significant issue with mental health? I know the fire service are reviewing it. I'd be keen to know a bit more about it and the detail behind what's been done, really.
Yes, I agree, and it is an issue that we've tried to get more detail on before, because well, Jason would frequently cite the percentage of non-crime related contacts with the police, a large proportion of which were mental health related. But I'm not sure we ever really got a very satisfactory picture of what the workload on the police really is. So I think that's a really good suggestion, that we use that as a basis for getting a report about the non-crime demand on the police and how that's being handled. Nikki?
I think we also, or I asked the question in regards to the 170 victims that were self-referred to the Victims Hub, with only 58 going to report a crime, and to have more detail as to what those reasons for the self-referral were, and you know why the crime didn't get reported, really. And then again, with the victims, young victims of crime and their families, what happened to the 28% who were not able to cope with everyday life after they had support?
Yeah, well, I think what we'll so Jane will be compiling the list of recommendations based on our review of the annual report, some of which I think we identified during the meeting could deserve a report in their own right. So I think we'll go through that, and then we'll share with the rest of you some of the questions that I think we were in effect asking at this meeting for a report. And then if there are any additions to that, and then we'll also circulate the BCV reports and any questions that arise from that. So yeah, okay, so Councillor Smith.
Yes, sorry, I missed it as it went past, the rural crime figures, which we were going to ask for statistics. Perhaps as that's something they need to prepare, we could ask for that for next time.
Yep.
Successful prosecutions for hair coursing and rural crime in general.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. So okay, Jane, if you and I review the actions from the recommendations for the annual report, and we'll pick out which are in fact questions for more detail that we that if it doesn't go into the annual report, then we should have in a report to the panel.
Yeah, okay. And those are the questions that panel members have kind of brought up in discussion further on in the meeting, like the ones I've just mentioned. If you guys can remember them, and I'll send an email out, and then if they can answer me with those questions, that would be great, because then I can add them into what we've already got for the next meeting as well.
Okay. Well, I mean, we should just be able to pick them out of the minutes. Yeah.
Well, yeah, exactly, those as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I ask what's the timetable for the publishing of the Police and Crime Commissioner's final report? Is it going to come out before the next meeting? I guess it probably is.
I don't think there's a fixed timetable, so but yes, I would expect it to be published before the next meeting.
So depending on whether the questions are answered in there, there may be other questions that we need to raise again.
Yes, I mean, I think anything that where we're asking for additional information, I think we should get that back to the panel, whether or not it goes into the annual report, because we simply won't know whether they've decided to agree to our recommendation or not.
Because I'll send everything over to the OPC's office once Edward and I have gone through it, so they'll get all the information of our recommendations straight away. So, and they choose whether they want to act on those recommendations or not.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Well, there was also who reads the report, those statistics.
Yeah.
Yes.
They'll be caught up in the actions. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we're a diminishing band.
Yes,
Are there any other questions or suggestions, and particularly in terms of the future agenda for future meetings, or for the next meeting in particular? No? Okay. Well, thank you all very much for your time and contributions, and thank you very much to Jane and Fiona for supporting us. And enjoy the rest of your evening. I know that Jane's going to be enjoying it on another Zoom call, so and I presume Fiona, you will too. Okay, right, well, thank you very much. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.